everyone to Mesa Left Church. It's great to see you all here this evening on this Thanksgiving weekend. And so, who ate too much this weekend? Anybody eat too much? I'd have to put myself into that category as well. We had some great food. I hope you all had a good time hanging out with family and friends. So tonight, what I want to do is I want to start off with a story. When about 9 years ago, I worked for a finance company, and I can remember my very first employee meeting. And this was like a district employee meeting. So several employees from our district all gathered together, and we just had a meeting to go over just some business. It was just a kind of group thing. We sold some insurance that we were having training on, and so that was kind of part of what the training was about, the meeting was about. And we had it at this. It was kind of like this internet cafe type place. And I remember it very well because of the table that they had in their conference room. The table was immaculate. I'm a guitar player, and I love acoustic guitars. And what comes with that is you tend to have an appreciation for different types of trees and different types of grain and wood. And so this tabletop was probably the largest chunk of maple that I'd probably seen in my life. It was huge, it was ginormous, and the lacquer on the top was just glass. I mean, you could see the curls and the grains in it. And the unique thing about maple is that when it gets diseased, it gets these little dimples, these little spots. And so there were dimples in different areas. There were big, huge swirls and curls. And if you ever seen any of the real expensive guitars that just have really, really fancy wood grain in them, it's usually maple. That's typically what they put on the top there. And so I love the table. And I remember this place because of the table. And so we're getting the meeting started. We gathered everybody in, and they kind of had this conversation about paying attention. And it kind of was joking, and we're kind of everyone was kind of talking, and the speaker. The presenter was telling about, I got to make sure I pay attention, and my district manager was there, and I'm the brand new employee, and so, it was all about paying attention. So she starts her presentation, and she asks a question. Well, at the very same time that she asked the question, I just had to admire this table just one more time. And so my mind kind of wandered, and I was looking at this table, and it was rough cut on the edges. I mean, you should have seen it. It was gorgeous. And so I'm looking at this table, I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful table. And then I hear my name called, Chris. And I look up, and everyone's looking at me. And the reason why they're looking at me was because the presenter asked a question and called on me to give an answer. But the only problem is I had no idea what the question was. And so I'm sitting there as a brand new employee in this meeting, and everybody's staring at me, and we just got done talking about paying attention. We just got done, the district manager was there saying, hey, you all need to pay attention to what she's going to say. The very first question, the very first person they call wasn't paying attention. And so I'm trying to jog my memory to come up with a question, and I kind of fumbled, ended up asking somebody else. But, don't you hate it when that happens? I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it seems like it happens at the most inopportune times. Like when you're paying attention, when you're having a conversation with your spouse or your boss or a good friend or even somebody maybe that's, a relation isn't that great with, and, your mind wanders for just a second, or you think about something for just a second, and they say something important, and they ask you a question, and you have this blank look on your face, and you have no idea what they just said, and you kind of got to backpedal a little bit. I don't know about you, but it feels like to me that this happens all the time. Like for some reason, my mind tends to wander a bit when I'm talking with people, and so this kind of thing seems like it happens to me. I don't know if it happens to you very much, but we're starting a new series tonight, and the series is about relationships. And this very first message in this series is about communication. And so tonight we're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about how it is we should communicate with each other. Why is it even important to communicate? They say that in a relationship, when there's a failure in the relationship, when there's a breakdown, when there's something wrong, it can usually always be traced back to communication. There's usually some problem, there's something wrong in the way that they're communicating, in the way that they're interacting. Now, I understand that not everybody in here is married, that not everybody in here is in a relationship or has a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, but the truth is that relationships are everywhere. So don't tune me out. Don't, flip on the off switch and, go to your phone and start, playing Candy Crush because you think this doesn't apply to you because you don't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or you're not married, because the truth is that we have relationships all around us. We are a social group. We love social media. And the truth is that this whole social media era that we're in right now, it's just kind of like this accelerated version of what's been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. God created us to be social beings. He created us to have camaraderie with others. He created us to have relationship. And we use our earthly relationships kind of as a model, as somewhat how we relate to our Heavenly Father. And so it's important. Relationships are very important in our life. And so we're going to start with communication, because communication is the foundation of a good relationship. Now, there are two different types of communication. Two different types. There's healthy communication and there's unhealthy communication. And it doesn't matter where you are or where you go, you cannot escape that. You cannot escape communicating with somebody else. This is not specific to church life. This isn't specific to being a Christian. This isn't specific to just being American. We use communication everywhere. With our friends, with our bosses, with our family members. And so hopefully by the time we get done tonight, when we get through this message, you will be able to take something away that you can plug in to just about every single relationship that you have in your life. And maybe, just maybe, you might be able to improve a poor relationship that you have with somebody. Whether it be a boss, whether it's a friend, you can take what we talk about tonight, and if you're interested in possibly making that relationship a little bit better, you'd be able to plug it in, and you'd be able to build a better, healthier relationship out of that. Now, communication, like I said, has been going on, since the beginning of time. Since God created Adam and Eve, they obviously communicated with each other. And about 2,000 years ago, in the start of the early church, there was a man by the name of Paul who was an apostle to the early churches. And what he did is he helped keep the continuity of the church. When it was just getting started, they didn't have the New Testament, they didn't have the Bible, they had the Old Testament, they knew what all the laws were, but what kind of kick-started the early church was the gospel, was the fact that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and that now everybody is eligible. Everybody and anybody can have a relationship with the Father. It was no longer a priest-God thing. It was now an everybody-God thing. And so they were spreading that, the good news. They were spreading the news around. And so they had apostles, and what the apostles did is they wrote letters back into the church to help keep continuity in the church, to kind of, say, well, let's not do it like this, because you're kind of straying a little bit away from what Jesus was talking about and what the heart of God is in this thing called church. Let's just kind of direct you back this way. And he wrote a letter to the Ephesian church. And he talked about communication in a verse in Ephesians. And we're going to be in Ephesians 4, Ephesians 4, verse 29. In Ephesians 4:29, it says this. It says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So even to about 2,000 years ago, Paul knew that communication was important. That communication was very important in the church and in everyday life and in our relationships outside of church. Now, communication in itself is made up of two different parts. Right? If you're going to communicate with someone, there's two things that you've got to do. You got to say something, and you've got to listen. So there's talking and there's listening. There's some form of communication. There's some form of saying something, whether it's a different language or even people who can't speak, they use their hands to say something. And then there's also the listening side of it. There's also the listening part of it as well. So there's two parts of communication, and both of these parts are equally important. They're equally important. You can kind of compare communication to a heart. All right. Now, a heart, in its most rudimentary sense, is a two-stage pump. All right. What it does is it pumps blood through our body, and it's a two-stage pump. So you have the upper part of the heart, and you have the lower part of the heart. The upper part of the heart receives all the blood, and so what it does is it takes the blood in through two chambers on the top, and then it squeezes it down to the lower chambers of the heart, and then the lower chambers pump it either to the lungs or throughout the rest of the body. And so it brings oxygen into the lungs and then back into the heart, and then it goes out to the rest of the body. Now, if there's a failure in any part of our heart, if one of those two stages fails, we're in pretty big trouble. We're in really big trouble. If we're not getting the blood that's going from the top to the bottom, we're not getting the blood to be able to go to the rest of the body, then, if that happens for too long, our life will end. That's just a fact. If our heart goes too long without working properly, we will die. We will end. But for some reason, we think that we could go through life with dysfunctional communication. We think we can go through life either being able to talk and not listen, or just being able to listen and not talk. And so maybe you've heard people comment like this, say, well, I'm not much of a talker, but I'm a good listener. Or other people say, I just like to say what's on my mind. I just like to say whatever comes to my mind. I really don't care what you think. I don't care about anything. It's just, I'm just an honest person, and so I'm just going to say what's on my mind. But the reality is if we can't get the two parts of our communication working together, and if they're not working properly, we're going to start seeing our relationships fail. Because more often than not, when there's a breakdown in a relationship, it's because there's a breakdown in communication. And so let's talk about that for a little bit. So what I want to talk about is actually a healthy communication. I don't want to talk about unhealthy. I don't think any of us need to learn how to be unhealthy in our communication. I think we got that down pretty good. And I can't imagine any of us in here not saying that there's been a time in our life where we haven't been very good at communicating and relating to somebody else. And so we're going to talk about healthy communication. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is, how are we saying it? How are we saying it? Some of you from my generation remember a character that Chris Farley developed named Matt Foley. He was a self-proclaimed motivational speaker, and it was a sketch that was performed on Saturday Night Live. Now, if you're not familiar with who Chris Farley is, he was a very overweight comedian, and a very funny guy, very funny. I personally thought of him as hilarious, and especially his Matt Foley character. Just watching some YouTube videos on Matt Foley was hilarious to me. And so, but what Matt Foley was, he was a self-proclaimed motivational speaker. But there was a twist, of course. Being a comedy sketch on Saturday Night Live, he was a horrible motivational speaker. He kind of came in and he was very loud. He was very in your face, and oftentimes, he would insult the people that he's trying to motivate. He wore clothes that were just about 2 or 3 sizes too small for himself, and just like his mannerisms and the way he spoke, just when you thought he was going to say something encouraging, he would just insult you, and he was always seemed to be down on his luck. Now, the thing with Matt Foley is he was saying what was on his mind. He was saying, he thought for sure he was being a good motivational speaker. He thought he was right on the money, like he was actually doing some good in his communicating as far as being a motivational speaker. But the problem is that he really wasn't. He wasn't at all. Can you imagine what that would be like, having somebody come up here and trying to motivate you, to be a better person, and all they're doing is talking about how themselves are down on their luck. Or they would just insult you and do all kind of just brash things that would just kind of more or less distracted you from actually what he was trying to do. And so how is it that we are saying what we're trying to communicate? There are several different aspects to speaking and to talking. Our speech is not just one-dimensional. It's not just us saying words coming out of our mouth. We have our body language. We have how we put emphasis on words. And so how is it that we're saying stuff? Paul wrote, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your body. Don't let anything that's going to tear people down come out of your mouth. Only speak that which is wholesome. Use it to build people up. Use it to encourage people. So when we're talking, are we, just being honest, and are we just kind of tearing people down with our words? I mean, maybe you know somebody like that. They're just, it's hard to talk to them because you're not sure what they're going to say. You're not sure what's going to come out because, as far as they're just being, themselves. They're just being honest. And it's not always encouraging. It's not always encouraging. And I find it really difficult to be able to relate to those folks. This is just me personally. Maybe you have a much better time and a much easier time at that, but I have a difficult time. I'm I'm somebody that kind of puts a lot of weight on people's words and what they say. And so my wife and I took this, read this book before we got married called The 5 Languages of Love. And one of my love languages was encouraging words. And so I have a hard time with folks like that. I have a really difficult time with people who just, say, I'm just being honest. I just speak what's on my mind. I don't care what people think about what I say. And it's hard work for me to be able to, listen and hear and understand where they're coming from. But how are we saying the things that we're saying? Are we running what we're saying through filters? Are we actually asking ourselves a question, would this be a good thing to say at this time? Or are we just letting stuff just fly out of our mouths? How is it that we are filtering what we're saying? One other thing about the way we talk and the way we communicate is oftentimes, like myself, I tend not to say stuff. I tend not to say things. And so while we've been kind of hammering and talking about the folks that, just say everything, there's another side of that pendulum too. There are those of us that really don't say anything at all. We kind of just sit back in our little corner, we just kind of listen, we kind of observe, and we really don't say anything. We kind of fall in the category of, well, I'm a good listener, but I'm not really a good speaker. I'm not really somebody that likes to talk. And for a lot of years of my life, I did not say what I thought. I did not speak my opinion. I did not, interject, if I thought something was a good idea. I usually went with the crowd, and I usually kind of, did what everybody else wanted to do. But what I found out is that even on the flip side, not saying anything is just as detrimental. In fact, the more that we conceal ourselves and the more that we keep from saying, the more that we are actually portraying a dishonesty to the other person. Let me give you an example. For instance, say you're in a relationship with somebody, and maybe there's something from your past, or there's something maybe that you're into now that you think they may not be able to handle. Or maybe there's some news that you got that you may not think they would be able to handle. And so you keep it from that person. You don't tell them, you're not honest with them about something from your own life. You're not open with them as far as what you're going through or what you're feeling, because you're afraid that if you do that, they may not be able to handle that. Or you may be afraid of what their reaction might be. And so we tend to keep stuff inside of ourselves. And so there's a lot of years that I kept stuff. I kept stuff in. Even in my marriage, if I thought that, what I was going to say was going to, would hurt my wife or would maybe create some kind of argument or a fight, I kept it inside myself. I just kept it in. And so I was on the flip side of that, where I didn't say anything. But the problem is that creates dishonesty. Because you're not being fully honest with that person. Even at your work. Especially at your work. I mean, how many times do we, we kind of do a job and we only do it halfway, and maybe we're supposed to sweep and mop the floor, but we only swept it, and we're like, it looks fine, I won't mop it. And the boss comes around and says, so how did that sweep and mop go? Oh, it went great. I got that all taken care of. We don't think so much as withholding information as being dishonest. But as we continue to do that, what we do is we start laying bricks. We start laying bricks and we start building up walls between us and the other person. And so pretty soon, you pretty much can't say anything that you're feeling. You can't disclose anything to the other person because you've built this wall of dishonesty by not even saying one word. And you just created another unhealthy relationship in your life. That now you're going to have to take down that wall. You're going to have to reconcile a lot of things that you did not say and that you did not reveal. Just because, you were afraid. It was a lot of fear for me. I didn't talk because I was afraid. So there's two sides to that part. There's two sides. And the second thing in communication is how we listen. Or in other words, how we receive it. So how are you taking it in? How do you take in what other people are saying? And there's two ways. There's reaction, and then there's a response. You can have either a reaction to what people tell you, or you can come up with a response to what people tell you. Our reaction a lot of times is generated because we are being defensive of what has been said. And so somebody has opened up to us, and the first thing, or someone says something that we disagree with, and we have this reaction. We have this sense of, well, I got to say something because my emotions are high, and so we react because we're defensive, because for whatever reason maybe they hurt your feelings, and so now we're responding in a defensive way. And the problem with that is it's a highly emotional response, and usually 9 times out of 10, a reaction makes the situation worse. So having a reaction to what people say is not going to promote health in that communication. It will actually tear down, because you're going to have a reaction, and then the other person is going to have a reaction, and then you're going to have a reaction back to their reaction, and they're going to react back to your reaction, and then pretty soon you don't even know what the original conversation was about, because now you're over on this buddy trail of going back and forth, and a lot of times that's where arguments start, is in our reactions. Because we got hurt, we were offended. Man, you said something that offended me, so I got to step up and I got to say something back to you. But when we react, we are not developing that healthy relationship. We need to take a step back, and we should look at responding and not reacting. Because in a response, what that does is it gives you time to think. You can take a step back and you can kind of breathe. You can kind of feel what's going on. And I'll tell you what, it is okay if somebody says something that you don't agree with or that you don't like. It is okay to tell them, you know what? Let me think about that and I'll get back to you later on that. You see, we have this need. We have something inside of us that thinks, well, I got to say something right now. I mean, I got to come up with that defense. I got to come up with that saying that, I got to get that going right now. But you don't have to. You don't have to. It's okay to take a breath and to respond later. See, there were 3 old guys walking down the street. And this is kind of an example of, even though what we say, people will take it in differently. So 3 old guys are walking down the street, and the first one says, "Man, it's windy outside," or "It's windy today." And the second old guy goes, No, it's Thursday." And the third old guy says, "Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe we should stop for a drink." And so it's not so much about what's being said, because what they said wasn't wrong. What they said, wasn't bad. What it was how the person heard it. It was how the person heard what was being said. See, we cannot help. We are not responsible for how people receive what we say. The only thing that we are responsible for is what comes out of our mouth. And the only thing we're also responsible for is how we receive what other people say to us. And so we should not be worried about how somebody is going to take something that we say. We should not be worried about what other people are going to say to us, because we can't help that. We could run around, we could, try to control our environment, we can try to control what people are saying around us, but the truth of the matter is that we can't. The only thing we can control is what we say and how we receive it. See, what healthy communication promotes in relationships is transparency. And people these days, they want transparency. People desire transparency. You see it everywhere. You saw it with the housing market. When it all came down, when it all crashed, what happened? People wanted transparency in everything. So now they make loan originators, they make mortgage officers go through this intensive training, take this really long test, and then they got to continue to learn in their field and continue to test because they require transparency in that. What about with the Bernie Madoff thing? With his whole scandal? He was concealing all kinds of rotten stuff. It cost people millions of dollars. So what, people started marching on Wall Street. They wanted transparency. They wanted to know what was going on in that building. They wanted to know what was going on in those guys' minds, in their desks, in their computers. They wanted transparency in that. Or even the NSA leaks that came out. Boy, talk about people demanding transparency. We found out that, the government may or may not have been spying on us, spying on other countries. You interpret the information the way you want to interpret it, but people wanted transparency. They wanted to know what was going on. But here's the catch. To get transparency, you need to be willing to be transparent. If you're going to expect transparency in somebody else, if you're going to expect transparency in an organization, in a church, in a business, in the government, it starts with yourself. You need to be willing to be transparent. And to get that transparency, you need to develop healthy communication. You need to be open with yourself, to be able to talk about yourself, to be able to say what's on your heart. So you need to be open about what you say. But then on the second side of it, you also need to be open about how you receive it. Because it starts with us. We can demand, we can, write letters, we can ask all kinds of things of all kinds of other people to show how they're transparent, to show their cards. But if we're unwilling to do it with ourselves, how in the world can we expect others to do it? So I came up with a little saying. I wanted a way that we could remember this. I wanted a way that we could remember how we're going to be transparent. And it's this. It says we need to be open to say it, and we need to be open to take it. So we need to be open to say it, and we need to be open to take it. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to take this saying, and you know what? You're in luck. Because every single one of you is going to have an opportunity this week to be able to practice healthy communication. What are the odds, right, that all of us sitting here would be able to have an opportunity to practice healthy communication? And so the first thing that I want you to do this next week, and this is only if you're interested in having healthy communication. If you're okay with the unhealthy communication in your life and destructive relationships, that's, be my guest, but, if you want to have healthy relationships, if you want to develop strong relationships, let's start with our communication. And so first, we need to be open and honest about something in our life. Be open and honest about something in our life. Now, obviously, there will be different levels of transparency with different people. You're going to have one level of transparency with your spouse, or say with a girlfriend or fiance, than you will, say, with your boss or employee. Okay? And, I get that. I understand that. And so when you're being open and honest about something in your life, I do want to ask you to be careful, who it is that you're telling this to. Use your best judgment, gauge the level of open and honesty with the person you do want to tell. But, all of you are going to have an opportunity to do this week. And I think that's great. And so do that. Be open and honest with someone. Now, it does not have to be this big, deep, dark secret. You don't have to reach down to the depths and spill out your beans. Maybe for someone else, that might be the case. Maybe there has been something deep down that you've been hiding from somebody very important to you. That, it's time to come out. It's time to bring that out and start promoting a healthy relationship. So number one, be open and honest with somebody about something in your life. Number two, be open to receive what somebody else has said to you. So if you're sitting here and you're going to practice with somebody else that's sitting here, and they tell you this big, deep, dark secret that's been way deep down in their life, you need to be open to be able to receive that. So what that means is that there's no reaction. We can't then respond or react to what they said out of emotion, because a lot of times the reason why it was so pushed down is because it may be a little hurtful. Now, it's okay if it is hurtful, but we need to make sure that we don't react in our hurts, because that's not promoting what we're wanting to promote. That's not going to build up a healthy relationship. So we got to be able to receive what people are saying to us. I, for instance, say, I go to my wife and I say, Emily, that scarf that I told you that I really liked? No, I really didn't like it so much. That's an example of being open and honest. Now, for her, she's going to have a chore to do because, right there, since I was dishonest to begin with, she's going to have a choice whether to react or respond. And so oftentimes I think, even in that case, a little bit of reaction may be okay. But, you got to make sure you're going to be open to respond in a good way. Be open to take it. Because for a lot of us, reaching in and pulling out these secrets, reaching in and saying something that we have been concealing for a long time, it's a really big step. It's a really big step. So now remember, our responsibility on ourselves is how we say it and how we receive it. It's not how they're going to say it and how they're going to receive it. And so if we are learning and if we are receiving something that may be hurtful, just take a step back, take a breath, and respond. Don't react. Just respond. Because if we want to have transparency in our relationships, we need to be open to say it, but we also need to be open to take it. Now, what do you think this might look like? If you were to close your eyes and think, if we were to actually put this into practice, if we were to be responsible for what we say and how we receive things, and if we were thoughtful in the things that we said, we just didn't, fire off whatever, was on our minds. We actually were thoughtful, and we actually used our words to encourage and uplift people. And then when people responded to us, or even when people reacted to us, to something that we said, and they fired something right back at us, we took the time and took a breath and actually came up with a response rather than a reaction. How might that change your relationships in your life? I mean, just think about that for a moment. Maybe there is a specific relationship that you have a very difficult time with. Maybe there is somebody in your life that, man, it doesn't matter what happens. It's difficult. It is so difficult. How could practicing this change that? And then maybe, just maybe, somebody else sees how you've worked on being a healthy communicator, how you wanted to promote transparency, and how you wanted to make sure that this relationship built up. How might they respond? Maybe somebody else, maybe a neighbor or a coworker might look at you and go, hey, what would happen if I tried that? I wonder how they got to that place. I mean, just imagine for a moment, maybe what that might look like in your relationships at home, at school, at work, in the community, in church, if we were open to say it and open to take it. Now, being transparent in our relationships does not guarantee smooth sailing. Okay? I don't want to paint this picture of, if we're just open to say it and we're open to receive it, life will be perfect. It's going to be all rainbows and sunshine, and it's just going to be smooth as glass, and we won't have any problems. That's not true. That's not reality. Okay? We're all different people, and we all have different viewpoints and different opinions about all kinds of different things. And so what happens is we have conflict in our life. It doesn't matter how healthy our communication is, we're going to have conflict. And the thing is that not all conflict is unhealthy. In fact, conflict should be healthy. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much, Lord, for this group of people that on their holiday weekend decided that they would come out and they would come to church. I just pray that you would just bless them, Lord. And as we go through our week, I would pray that you would show us an opportunity to be able to be open to say it and open to take it. Lord, I pray you keep us safe throughout this next week, Lord. If any of us are traveling back home or traveling somewhere else, that you would provide safe travels. We just thank you and praise you in your name. Amen.